Generic strategies. Now, this is a very, very useful model when you want to understand the strategy of an organization. It's an old and a classic model that can be used even today. What it says in a nutshell is that you can probably compete in the market in two distinct ways, as you can see. One way is, of course, to be low cost. You're a cost leader in the market. And another way is to be different. So some companies that are low cost, like McDonald's, are selling because their offering is, of course, something that's quite cheap, or like EasyJet or Ryanair. If you're different, you have some sort of quality, you're selling something that is, of course, differentiated. You have something that's higher priced, usually because of that differentiation. Maybe the brand, like Apple. Apple is quite expensive. It's called different. It's of course addressed to everyone. So these two first assumptions or first examples are addressed to everyone, to the mass, everyone around the world, but you can be low cost or different. If you take this a little bit further now, in the same way, you could be either one or the other in a niche area, in a niche market. And a niche area means something specific. You're actually targeting your offering to a smaller, sometimes, market, not, of course, necessarily less lucrative, but a specific segment of the market. To give you an example, someone that makes, let's say, screws, is small screws that we use for chairs or for building, that's in the construction industry. And they're quite cheap. So you're low cost in a very specific market. You're not going to find them in every store around the world. And then, on the other hand, if you're selling a Ferrari, let's say, or a Bugatti, so a very expensive car, so you're different in this area, different in a specific market because not many people buy a Bugatti every day, as you understand. So it's not focused on the masses, and that's what it's called niche. So if you think about it, there's four distinct ways to compete. Now, what has happened in the world, and we are seeing it more and more, is that because of the advances of technology, someone can say, well, I'm also low cost and I'm also different. It's logical, right? How can you do that? Because technology has made that easier. Because in the old days, you probably couldn't. Something was cheap, it was made from cheap, let's say, supplies. Something was more expensive, it was usually made from something, of course, more expensive in terms of supply. So these days, you could be, as they say, hybrid. It's the hybrid strategy. And a very good example, if you think about it, a global example, is Zara. Zara has managed to be quite low cost, but also have a differentiation in terms of design, even though it has been, of course, the case that they are taking designs from other big, let's say, designer let's say brands, but they're using them in such a way where they're actually occupying that hybrid in the middle space. So in essence, there's 5 basic ways to compete. And if you noticed, all these organizations, or the examples I mentioned, are focusing on that specific way to compete. They're not doing everything, because you cannot be Mercedes and sell cheap cars. You're selling expensive cars, you're different. Even your lower model, your smaller model, is actually expensive in that category. You cannot be Adidas or Nike in the sports shoes or the sports apparel market and sell cheap things. They're more different. Everything they sell is aligned with that strategy. You cannot do everything. If you're McDonald's, you cannot sell expensive burgers, because that's the philosophy of the company. So all the activities that you do in every certain example that I've just spoken about need to be low cost or different. That's the idea and how to see this. If you want to do all of them, my final point is to create new brands. The only thing you can do is to create new brands, because that way people are not going to, of course, confuse it. For example, Toyota had a low-cost car in the 1980s, and they created Lexus. It's owned by the same company, but the brand is different.